and government officials who come out to Guam do get exempt from the hotel occupancy tax. We always thought it was a federal requirement and a federal law until we continued to do the research and we found out it really is an exemption based on our local law. And so why are we, when I go to Washington, D.C., I pay a hotel occupancy tax or any other place as a government official, even if I'm traveling on government business. So why is it that when the federal government sends all of their personnel out here, they don't pay the hotel occupancy tax because they claim an exemption? And it's because we decided to do it from our own local law. So we've actually repealed that exemption. Excuse me. And we will see from, based upon the exemptions that have been filed by the different hotels, that we will realize a slight uptick in the tourist attraction fund collections, because we know that there are exemptions being claimed by the hotel for these DoD personnel and military personnel. And so this would, again, allow us greater revenue enhancements. The improved reporting from the income tax statistics based upon the Service Bureau and such will ensure that we have greater improvement in revenue projections that will occur with the Office of Finance and Budget, with the Special Economic Service Group. And then also we want to make sure that we continue to track and understand the impact of fiscal policy on Guam, such as the EITC and ATC. And so one of the things we're also doing in terms of these reimbursables that we get, specifically with the additional child tax credit, is that all the reimbursements would go back into the refunds, 50%, and then a portion, 50%, shall be deposited into this a tax refund efficient payment trust account. It will be an interest-bearing account. It's all set up in law, that, and then the interest income from that can be used by revenue tax for seasonal employees, income tax processing time, and so forth. Plus, of course, they'll have the availability of that fund to improve their efficiencies within the department. So when we go to bridging the gaps with regards to the expenditures, where do we go? Well, we want to, and we feel very confident that we're going to continue the ongoing work with the Special Economic Service and the Special Accounting Service Group to identify unbudgeted expenditures and other financial issues of the government of Guam. One of the things that we didn't know until we put together this group and we delved into more detail is the Section 30, overestimation of Section 30 funds. For the last couple of years, we didn't know this, I didn't know it at the legislature, but that we had overestimated the Section 30 funds. We received the cash up front, and then when they reconciled, we found out that we have to pay it back. And so when we had a party one year, because we had a $20 million extra in revenues, the next 4 years they're saying, give that money back. And so we've actually had to redo, they've withheld Section 30 by $5 million a year until we paid back the $20 million. The work of the Special Economic Service and Special Accounting Service Group will prevent some of this from happening in the future, because we've now come together and are looking at all of these processes within the government of Guam when we're looking at our expenditures and revenues. We'll be able to deal with that. We will continue to incorporate the unbudgeted expenditures in the annual budget. For the first time, we're looking at the cost of accepting credit cards. That amount has ballooned in the government of Guam over the years, so that it will be somewhere between maybe 3.5 to even up as high as $5 million. We have 5.7. We have budgeted for that now. We have actually put in the budget a process for the Department of Administration to solicit a new vendor for this program that would allow us to receive the gross liability, and that the person then that is using the convenience of a credit card will have to pay for that through a convenience fee. And that will help us address some of these terms. the interest on the income tax refunds and interest on prior year obligations. You'll see in Chapter 1 of the Budget Act where we prioritize the payment of income tax refunds, for example, so that we're able to pay the past due liabilities. We've set aside a portion of it to pay current year liabilities so that we don't end up incurring interest on those refunds. So of the $101 million we set aside, we will continue to retire prior year obligations on income tax liabilities, but we will also set aside at the minimum $65 million to pay for the 2009, so that when we pay that out, we won't have interest accrued to that liability. And we continue, once again, to meet on a regular basis with the Special Economic Service and Special Accounting Service and take a look at all of the information that's coming through the different departments and agencies responsible for the management of the government resources. And we continue to tweak the budget as we see going forward to adjust for those issues. And then we will continue to prioritize the full payment of the refund provisions. With regards to the deficit reduction, again, the key features are contained in Chapter 1 of Public Law 3196, and that is we assess the full liability of the government of Guam and we coordinate with DOA. So we're actually monitoring what's our past due obligations and how are we going to retire these and how do we pay. We prioritize prior income tax refunds and prior year obligations with the 2% set aside for deficit reduction. In addition to that, we've also set aside the revenues that are collected above the projections to go towards retiring these past due obligations. So if we collect above what was projected for the withholding tax portion of our revenue stream, that increase in above the projection will go to pay the old income tax refunds. When we collect a certain amount above the GRT projections, and we continue to maintain our spending patterns as outlined in the budget, any amount over the GRT collections that's been adopted as revenue will go towards paying prior year obligations of this government of Guam. So any increase, we've earmarked that already for deficit reduction. And we will continue the monitoring of the budgeted income tax refund payments. Governor Cowell has reversed his position that we're not going to pay refunds, because to me that's the first thing. Before we write any check for any government activity, we should write that check for those refunds based upon the set aside of the reduction for the between the gross revenue of the government of Guam and the provision for refunds before we get to the operating budget of this government of Guam. That's the first check we should write on a planned and scheduled basis that needs to be developed as called for in Chapter 1 of Public Law 3096. And we earmark the efficiencies in processing to allocate funding for Department of Revenue and Tax. We've also put in an incentive program for income tax processors. And we pursue the unfunded liability. One of the issues we're pursuing in Washington, D.C. that we've had meetings with is the earned income credit. As you know, the earned income credit is a right of the eligible Guam taxpayers pursuant to our mirror code of the IRS code. The amount that we pay out is not reimbursed by the federal government. And that amount now totals about $40 million a year. So $40 million of the refunds that we paid out a year are for earned income tax credits to taxpayers who don't have a tax liability. And that really eats up our cash flow. And so we have worked with the Congresswoman and some of our friends in Washington, and we're working with the Department of Revenue and Tax to address this matter in much the same way as we did the additional child tax credit, and try to get, at the minimum, the application